Hi everybody, thanks for coming. I'm going to quickly introduce Chris, and then I'm actually going to talk. I'm going to start by interrupting his talk for 5 to 10 minutes about food waste from a broader perspective. I'm doing my senior project with Chris. So Chris is from New York. He came to Maine. What year did he come?
91.
91. To work in the hospital at the cardiopulmonary division of the hospital. He's educated as a speech pathologist.
When I came here in 91, I was a respiratory therapist, and I was the director of cardiopulmonary services. And Thomas is right, I'm also a speech pathologist, but that was after the hospital fired all their managers in 97. 30 of us lost our jobs, and instead of moving, I went back to school. So I went to Orono and studied communication sciences and disorders, which is the field of study for, most of the time, speech pathologists.
He's much better at introducing himself. And then along the way, somehow he ended up doing farming and also gleaning. Now he's a dedicated gleaner as well, and puts on the Food for All community suppers that many of you are familiar with and have visited before on Thursdays on Ledgemont. But if you want to add something.
This is Tomas. Let's hear it for Tomas. It's a good call on doing the senior project with Chris Brown, huh? I was like, yes. Tomas has got some great stuff to show, and why don't you go through that?
Yeah,
We'll
so
fill in the blanks.
to set up the talk a little bit, Chris is going to talk more about the specifics of the work he's doing and organic recyclers and the Food for All community meals. I'm going to set it up a little bit by taking a step back and talking about the importance of food waste. So I'll go through these three questions. Why is food waste an important issue? How much waste are we talking about? And a little bit about the history of gleaning. In the more academic community, these are the two big issues that are recurring in the different reports and books I've read on the topic. Generally speaking, there's the food print idea, the embedded energy that goes into the amount of food that's wasted. That's all the way from the cradle to the grave, all along the food supply chain. So farm to fork, whatever you want to call it. See the amount of water that goes into it, the amount of land, fuel, time, and energy that goes into this food, which quite a bit of it ends up going to the landfill. And then the other aspect that has been highlighted and emphasized by many people is the connection to hunger, where we're living in a world where there's extreme hunger, but also extreme waste, extremely abundant food, but we have extreme hunger coexisting. So the idea is that either complicates the issue quite a bit, or there's potential to address both issues at once. A little bit on how much waste are we talking about? In the U.S., based on different 31% was an estimate done by the USDA 2014 report. That was not including the entire food supply chain. That was just retail and consumer, so further to the consuming end of the food supply chain. Then 40% was an estimate put out by NRDC. So, and the 31% matches up with about $161 billion worth of food. So to get an idea of how much food that is, that's a big number. I converted it into African male elephant equivalents. So that's 22 million African male elephants every year. 22 million. That's a lot of food. Okay.
22 million elephants.
Elephants of weight of food that's wasted. Okay. And globally, it's 30 to 50%, which is about 1.2 to 2 billion tons, which is equivalent to, if we go back to the African male elephant, 220 million African male elephants every year. I don't know if that helps you conceptualize that,
That's a lot of packet there.
but that's a lot of food, right?
How many elephants are there in the world?
Yeah, I was just wondering.
It's not
I didn't
20
know
yet.
that.
And then lastly, just want to talk a little bit about the history of gleaning. The idea of this section is to say that it's not a new idea, not a new concept. This is a famous painting that also accompanies the documentary called The Gleaner's and I. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but I recommend you check it out. So from 1850, gleaners in the field collecting wheat. And then I also have a quote in here from the Old Testament. It talks about gleaning. Would someone like to read it out?
I do it. It's from Leviticus. Quote, "Now when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and for the stranger." That's that picture.
Yep.
Those folks are they're not really well dressed. These are poor people, and it was the wealthy that had the land. And just as as a regular routine thing, they understood not to take it all, so that the poor can come in and take what they could. And they only took what they could. And there are products that continue to grow. For instance, broccoli.
So gleaning is not a new idea, but it has been adapted to fit the current society, current food systems. And then a little bit on more recent history in the U.S. Related to food recovery and gleaning, which tend to be used interchangeably, those two terms. The Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Food Donation Act was passed in 1996, and that was meant to, it's hard to read here, but to encourage the donation of food and grocery products to nonprofit organizations for distribution to needy individuals by giving the model, blah, blah, blah. So to encourage grocery stores to donate their food that is considered unsellable, but is still edible, like this stuff. And so from 1996 to 1999, there was actually a federal employee whose job was to coordinate food recovery and gleaning efforts in the United States. But there hasn't really been a follow-up after 1999. Why?
Good question.
Good question.
Is there one employee who was elected?
Oh, yeah, one employee, he ended up appointing, so he was working within the USDA, and he appointed state representatives or state coordinators as well to coordinate efforts in each state. But it was one employee. Better than now, but not great, right? So I hope that is not too detached from the rest of the talk, but that was meant to give a little bit of context, a little bit of a broader perspective. So Chris can, yeah, Chris can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for your interest in this topic. I think the great place to start, thank you very much, Thomas, by the way, it's real solid stuff. I don't have the technologies down pat, but you do, and that's why I think we make a great team, for this one of the reasons. Gleaning. Most people, when I started talking about this word gleaning, had no idea what it meant. And I actually wasn't even sure on the spelling of it until I finally found out it is with an A, not an E, not two E's. But anyway, gleaning, what is gleaning? Gleaning is the art of going out and making sure something that is viable does not go to waste. And we're modern day gleaners. I think gleaning has fallen deaf on American ears. On the work I've done, it's been about 100, 150 years where we don't know what that word means anymore. We really haven't had to go out and glean. You know, most people, if they were able to afford land, they can buy their land now. And we don't have these mass lots of the mega wealthy letting us come in and glean away. So I think once the industrialized world happened, this kind of a scene really fell by the wayside because we didn't have to. We had it in boxes or bags. I consider myself a modern day gleaner, and it was not really by choice that this happened in my life. So Tomas says that Chris Brown came from New York and came up here to work, and I did. I came up here cold. I did not know this area from anything. I had no idea what Bar Harbor meant. When you said Bar Harbor, and people went, oh, this is great. Actually, the only thing I knew about Bar Harbor was an old Lozenger commercial for, I think it was some kind of a what was it called, Fisherman's Friends Lozengers, and they showed some guy like in New England fishing gear, and the waves are splashing on him, and it was like Bar Harbor, Maine, and the guy takes out this lozenger because he had a sore throat, and everything was better after the commercial, you know. So I came up here because I was a newlywed, and I was looking at living a purposeful life, and I was looking for a new job. I was a director of respiratory therapy services and in New York, in Tarrytown, at a hospital called Phelps. And it was like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna go more towards the business end of life and have to work and gotta have to must? Or are we gonna embrace life? And I found this job offering up here in Bar Harbor. And it was the trip up here and the sign as you crossed into the state that said the way life should be, that really hooked me. But let me warn you, that's just a sign. Anyway, coming up here cold like that, I was quite, you know, I was a medical professional, that's what I did. And literally lost my job in '97 because of a shift in the way healthcare was being offered in the state. It was under the guise of what was called managed care. And it was kind of like what happened in the recession that we just experienced, where all of a sudden, what got out on the street was that now's a real good time to cut your staff because you can hide behind the popular, you know, titles that are in the newspaper. Whether it was actually affecting these facilities or not, I really don't know. But we came to work on a Monday, 30 department heads got their notice, and I did not decide to leave because I bought property and I was raising a family, so going back to school made sense. Speech pathology or speech therapy made even more sense when I found out that that's what I was going to study next. It kind of found me through a needs assessment that I took at the University of Maine satellite station here in Ellsworth. So anyway, so I went back to school. I think this is really important for you to know because when I went up to school in Orono, it was, as a non-traditional student, I was 37 at the time, and it was a sea of very bright, brilliant young ladies who were traditionally in that field of study, and then me. And it was kind of weird because I got learned very, very hard as a non-traditional. They really, really raked me over the coals, and it was a good thing because a speech pathologist not only understands where speech and language comes from, but we understand the whole developmental continuum on a human being. Everything from pre-birth to the grave, we have an opportunity to intervene as that professional. I'll give you an example. At birth, sometimes a baby can't suckle properly because the suck-swallow reflex may not be intact. This is a place in early intervention as speech pathologists can make a huge, huge difference in that child's life. Not only that, a lot of times we see people, let's say parents, I call them big brain syndrome, where we have very, very modern parents, huge, huge intellects, huge kind of professions they pursue, and they decide to have a child. And now they're still using these $20, $30 words over here, and they got a baby down here, and it just doesn't work. You know? So there's a whole opportunity there for that speech pathologist to work with that child. I'll take you to the other end of the continuum. One of my subspecialties is dysphagia, which is swallowing disorders, and we really don't know anything about our swallowing until it goes awry, whether we have a stroke or whether we have some kind of neurological problem or even just a mild choking kind of an experience, but the swallow is so involved. And this is one of the great eliminators as we get older. You either kind of die of a broken hip or pneumonia. The pneumonias are usually acquired through what's called aspiration pneumonia, where a little bit of food got into your trachea and you wind up with a pneumonia because of that. Those are all identifiable and mitigated by a speech pathologist. So that kind of set me up to know how we operate as human beings. How do we actually function? You know, what is it that keeps us together and what makes us thrive? Well, I'm kind of like a hard luck story here, but in 2006, the state of Maine failed to pay their providers. I was a provider working with MaineCare, which is Medicare. I worked with the poor and needy. That's that was what I felt I was supposed to do. When the state of Maine failed to pay their providers, they did not tell us this. And me, as an independent provider, was way down on the lists, where hospitals were banging the gong saying, hey, we can't make payroll, when are you gonna cough up the money you owe us? Well, 12 months later, having gone through everything I had owned, all my little bit of savings I had, just to try to pay my note and feed my family, I had to start to raise animals. And I was thinking not so much about this yet, but that how do I feed my family? And I still, by the way, showed up for my patients, even though I was not getting paid. So when I started raising some animals, I also happened to experience the fact that grain, the corn that is in grain, had doubled in price, because the federal government about 06, 07 allowed more ethanol to go into gasoline. That drove grain prices almost double the next day. Again, short on cash, I decided, I decided, but it was like, oh, maybe there's some stale bread somewhere I can offset my chicken feed with. And it was at that moment when I went looking for some stale bread that my life completely changed. And it went something like this. I went to the manager of our local Hannaford and I said, hey, I need some stale bread to feed my chickens. He said, hey, let me show you what we throw out every day. And here we go, we walked through the back door, and I'll have to, like here, this was a pile, and the fellow went like this. He said, this is what we throw out every day. Now, some of you might remember what's called the Price is Right. Now, there's a new one, but this guy named Bob Barker would do this, and they had 3 curtains. And you had to pick between curtain number 1, curtain number 2, curtain number 3. Now, you might pick that curtain, and you might think you got a whole lot of money coming to you, but usually it was like an old junk car or something. But it was that action that sprung that memory. That was Bob Barker. He was like, what do you think? And what I saw was life-changing. There was a rolling dumpster that was no bigger than where Thomas and I are here, about that big, maybe 4 by 8. And it was not, here's the lip of the dumpster, and it was overflowing with food, boxes of food, produce, lots of leafy vegetables, fruits, and alongside the dumpster there was stacks of, and this is a very famous thing, a banana box. There was stacks of banana boxes burping over with food. And on top of that, there was 2 large shopping carts just full of bread and bakery. And I literally stunned looking at this. And he says to me, this is what we throw out every day. We call it shrink. And yeah, take what you want. And at that very moment, I just wanted some stale bread. But I knew this was next. This was what was next in my life. But I rejected it. I immediately said, I got no time, in my head. As soon as I said, I got no time, my grandmother shuts it. From right about here. Now, I grew up in an Italian household, but not a real like overly Italian household, and I can define that. If you were from maybe an overly Italian household in America, on on Christmas Eve, that's the decider. If I ask you what you do on Christmas Eve, then I know you might have grown in maybe a little bit more of an Italian household than I did. Christmas Eve is a big fish day for Italians that are really strict about it. I did not grow in that house, but I had a real Italian grandma. She was like my mom. Here it goes, ready? Right about here, she shouts at me, Christopher, what are you gonna do with all this food? And I said, because she was talking to me, I said, wait, Rosie, I got no time for this. I was trying to put my life together, right? I remember I was a speech pathologist, and I was like, and the manager says to me, who are you talking to? I said, hang on a second. I'm not talking to you, hang on a second. I'm talking to my grandmother. And she says, Christopher, only the way she could say it, Christopher, didn't I tell you how we survived the Depression? And so they were immigrants, right? And they went through the Depression and they had to crush bone to eat the marrow to get sustenance, right? Very successful people after that, right? Had a tremendously successful fruit and vegetable stand in the Bronx, and it was called Sunnyside Market, and it fell deaf on their children's ears. So unfortunately, I was born at the wrong time because I probably would have stayed with that whole model. Christopher, what are you going to do with those food? I told you how we survived the Depression, and I said, but Grandma, I got no time. She says, don't worry about it. And I looked at the manager, I go, okay. He goes, who are you talking to? I go, I'm talking to you now. I'll take it all. So I came around the back with my Suburban at the time, and I started loading up the food. And it was taking it out of that. It was kind of like a little bit of a, not quite a glorious dumpster diver, but here I am, loading up this truck. And I would leave the Hannaford, or I would start to pack my truck in the parking lot of the Hannaford, and out of the corner of my eye, there was somebody walking down the street. And nonverbal, now I know what that means, because now I'm a speech pathologist, but I would look away, and I would just smile. And then I would put that box over here like this, and I'd continue to work on this side of my truck. And this person, who was, you know, down and out, it was obvious because of the way they appeared, the clothing they wore, the shuffle they walked with, would come over and take out of the box, and then walk away. And I thought, wow, that was really cool, you know, how did that happen? So then I would then just drive through town, and that happened. I didn't have to say, now I do this, but I didn't have to say at the time, hey man, I got some food. You know, it wasn't that. Now I'm pushing it because I got tons of this stuff, we gotta get rid of it. But at the time, it was a homeless person showed up. Or I got a nod from somebody else that said, oh, you know those people over that way, they might use some of that. And then I would see the groups of different workers that came in here in the summertime. And I could tell you what the Russians like to eat, what the Jamaicans like to eat, what the Bulgarians like to eat, because I would just open up my truck and let them pick through it, and they would. And they were very specific about what they wanted. So wow, this is pretty cool. I'm delivering food to spots in Bar Harbor, as we affectionately know them as Bar Harlem. And I had no idea, I've been living here now how many years? I've been living here, and I'm going to these houses, and I'm like, gee, this is rough. And I hear all the locks. Yeah, what do you want? I'm like, somebody told me to come up, I got some bread. Oh yeah, all right, yeah. We'll put it right there. I'm like, okay. 7 o'clock in the morning, everybody's drinking. There's all sorts of drugs going on over here. I don't want to know any of this. I just want to drop that bread and I want to get the frick out of there and try to figure out how I'm going to get my mortgage payment next week. So that same spot became a famous drop spot because a lot of these folks they weren't eating, and they were just consuming really not good nutrition. And some of the kind of phrases I would use to entice them into accepting this was, I'd kind of like play it down. I'd say, here, why don't you guys take this and eat this? It might give you some color when you throw it all up later. And they're like, ha ha ha, this is great, So anyway, so they let me do it. One day, I do this again, and this was a big, kind of a scary spot where there was multiple rooms, 1 bathroom down the end of the hall, and I happened to walk in, the door was kind of ajar, and I would announce myself. I was like, hi, I'm here with the food, I'm just putting food over here, and I'll see you later. And then out comes a toweled female, and way younger than I am. I'm definitely not supposed to be in this house anymore. I'm like, I'm sorry, miss, I didn't mean to. She says, oh, no, what's that, the bread? I said, yeah, I'm just dropping off the bread. Oh, you're the bread fairy. I said, huh? I've been waiting to meet you. And I'm like, I gotta go, I'm sorry, enjoy the bread. So anyway, so I got dubbed the bread fairy. Well, that was kind of fun, and I was out there again doing all this work, not really knowing what I was doing yet, except I thought, it wasn't even a thought, I knew internally, intuition, it was the right thing to do. So, what do when you kind of got this mad scientist brain and you know just a little bit about how we do it? Well, you start studying this stuff, and you start to want to legitimize the work we do, whatever it is, because it is legitimate. It wasn't like I held anything out on these people because I gave them bread. It was just to share the bread and make sure that maybe a full belly stays off the street. So with that little notion of a full belly stays off the street, I had to go back to the police department and let them know that the DEA guys follow me around, let him know I'm just giving food to these people, okay? That's all it is. And they would say, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, why wouldn't I do that? I said, a full belly stays off the street, doesn't it? And they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we don't go out and fight when we're not hungry. I'm not gonna go out on the town when I got a full gut. I'll be like, you know what? I think I'm gonna watch The Simpsons again. Okay, so here I go. I delve into a literature review, and I want to hit it with, you know, this academic thing that I learned when I was up in Orono, because they learned me, like I said. So I did it. I'm like, wow. And there was only a few things out there. Now you can see some of the books that Tomas found. This is about 06, 07. So I'm getting all this food, I'm trying to move all this food, I'm telling people what gleaning is, and they're like, well, aren't you like a speech pathologist? And I'm like, yeah, well, you don't have time for that story. Just take some of the food, you know. What do you do? What do you do with all the food? Well, I can feed you bread all day, right? Because I had tons of bread. Then I started to realize, well, what if I took that bread and I grew something with it? You know, like it had more of a protein content in it than bread. Bread's about, what, 4 grams of protein per serving? What if I grow like chickens or pigs, and now you can have eggs, chickens, or pork, and that's more like 20-something grams of protein per serving? So that made sense. So, you know, Tomas also introduced me as a farmer. He left out the word. I am a farmer by default, okay? I did not wake up and say I was gonna be a farmer, although I have the last name Brown, it kind of fits nice, but I did not plan. I did not, like somebody in this room right here, Glenn, is a super farmer. She planned what she does. She executes her budget, and she executes her plan, and it's beautiful. You drive by the farm that was up on I can't wait to see the new set, but you would drive by on the Norway Drive and look in this field that was only deer at one point, and now there's just a beautiful farm. And I was like, wow, I can't wait to be like that one day, you know? But right now, I'm a scrapper, I'm a gleaner. I gotta go out and find everything I need because I have nothing anymore. The only thing I have is, hopefully the bank won't close, but I got a property. So with that, I went out and started getting pallets. And I went out and started learning about critters, because I traded this guy like a ton of bread for 2 piggies. And I got these 2 pigs, and I just fed them. I'm like, pigs are pigs, they love to eat, right? And I just kept throwing the cakes at them and throwing the food at them. And these poor hogs were like, they could barely walk. They were gigantic. Twinkle toes and tulip. Beautiful pigs. Gonna breed them, you know, I brought boars down. The boars are like, hey, that's not, they're like Jello, you know? We brought them to the butcher. The butcher's like, you want all this fat back? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, they're fat. That's all they are, is fat. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you don't want to grow a pig like that. So anyway, so we learned. So one of the best ways I learned is by mistake, and that, you know, and that's what life is anyway, but you kind of keep plugging along. So as time went on, I got really good at animal husbandry. I got really good at understanding what this glean is. And so I started thinking more about the pedagogy of developing this new industry, you know. This is really new. We're modern day gleaners. Let's go out and do this. And it's really, really difficult because you got lots of things to overcome. How am I doing, by the way, folks? This is what you came to hear today?
Yeah.
How am I doing? Okay, good. What do you do with all this food? How do you begin to talk to your peers, and not only your peers, but your grand-peers? I'm talking about the folks that are my age and plus 20 years about this. You know, they don't understand this at all. They think there's something wrong with me getting this food because the food's bad. So, you know, today I have, we're fortunate today, so I think there's enough for everybody to have some of these, but what's wrong with that, you know? What's wrong with it with some organic onions here? Oh wait, this is dented. That's no good. How about some, you know, potatoes? Oh, this is no good. And the reason it's, quote, no good is because you see how that's got a little green tint to it? When potatoes have green skin, you really shouldn't eat that part of the potato because it can cause an alkaloid effect. That you can do your own homework on that one. So you peel past the green and you still got tuber to deal with, okay? But this is not the green that we think of when we think of a potato that's gone by. This is green that's caused by fluorescent lighting. So if you look at the other potatoes in there, they're not. So a severely green potato, you would, again, need to peel past that. Today we also have some neat stuff like this here, this organic broccoli, and you know what? That is, yeah, I can't sell that. I mean, it's got the schmutz on it right there. So, oh, the other thing is, the packaging's a little torn here. This will be my supper tonight. Here, this is kind of neat. We have intact packaging. We have a product in here, it's ranch dressing and individual servings, which I think would probably last longer than when you actually open a salad dressing bottle that's now gonna be sitting in your fridge until the next time you have a desire for that salad. So this here keeps kind of nice, they're individual. Tomas and I, this was my breakfast this morning, so I don't even know, that's probably like $5 a bottle. So this is stuff that is on code, and I think that's really what part of the problem is the coding mechanisms that we have in America, where we have a sell-by date, a use-by date, a best-by date, a freeze-by date. Beer's got an expiration date now? I didn't know that. I've been trying to glean that beer product, but it's really hard to get. It's very difficult. Tarragon, I mean, I'm sure tarragon's gonna be one of the more expensive herbs, and you know what, rightfully so, as I look at that, that is no good. You know, that is gone by, I'm being serious now, and you can see it. Maybe you could pluck a couple leaves off of that and make whatever you were making, but you know what, this is a different application. This is not meant for people today. Pigs really don't eat this, but you can compost it. Or we could probably make a mash and make some kind of a fuel product out of that. On top of the plastic problem, right? I got a thing about spinach. It just seems like spinach and strawberries carry diseases, so I'm not a real big proponent of lean spinach, but you know, there's nothing wrong with this here today. Intact packaging, coated with today's date on it. And I don't even have all the bread that I could show you what comes off the shelf every day. So when we know now that we have a law, a federal law that's been on the books for over 10 years now, the Bill Emerson Food Act that Tomas showed you, that protects the gleaner, we should be doing this more. The Bill Emerson Food Act suggests that if you do these activities, you are now insulated from frivolous lawsuits, which unfortunately our country loves that. I mean, if we just dealt with tort reform, that would create a great deal of change besides our medical problems and all these other problems. But anyway, that's another subject. But I'm gonna give you food, and you can't sue me. You can try, unless I produce gross negligence, according to that act, I'm a good Samaritan and you can't do it. Or at least the judge is gonna say, no, there's this, you can't really, you know. I had a peanut allergy and I went to Food for All. Jesus, it's not a restaurant. I mean, you should know your allergies. My goodness. Somebody came in one night and they said, hey, I have a food allergy and we were wondering if there was nuts in anything. And we all shouted at the same time, there's nuts in everything. You know what I'm saying? If I'm offering a free meal, it's your responsibility as a consumer to come in and eat safely. Because you know it smells good, it looks good, but if you have a sensitivity, that's important. Same thing goes with this here. The nice piece about that law is it lets the consumer make that decision. It's apparently wholesome food. That's the buzzword. This is apparently wholesome food. I love it. They're stuck in the world apparently. You know, Richard and I went around the corner a couple times on this one. Why is it apparently wholesome? Well, the packaging is intact, it's labeled, it looks good. If I open it up, without making a mess. Yeah, it's been in plastic for a while, but I'll smell it. My nose says it's okay, you know, and heck, I'm having some of this later with some beers. Yeah. It's apparently wholesome food because it's labeled, the food looks good, and it's appealing to you still. Anything that has deleterious material in it is not apparently wholesome anymore. So if I give you a loaf of bread and you find a rusty nail in it later when you go home and open it up, you can't sue me for it. Just throw the bread out. You can't go back and sue Hannaford either because that food's not theirs anymore. It's mine. I'm the gleaner. I took responsibility for it. It goes from apparently wholesome food now to another stage, which we would call more animal feed quality. So let me give you an example of animal feed and also what would be considered pre-consumer waste. So apparently wholesome foods, the good stuff, everything that you have at Food for All when you come to our community dinner is apparently wholesome. Most of the time when we're giving away food, it's apparently wholesome. Huge, huge, huge amounts. That's what Tomas talked about. 40% of all the food ready to eat today will be wasted. That's the stuff that's apparently wholesome. Now we got a whole other category. Pre-consumer waste. Pre-consumer waste is just what it means. It has not hit your plate yet. You did not touch this. It was dealt with by kitchen professionals. I'll give you an example. Let's say we're a guacamole company and we make guac. Well, there's a whole lot of avocado skins and nuts that are being wasted. You ever see a pig chew an avocado nut? It's something to see. They can crush it and eat it just like you're chewing gum. Great source of nutrients, right? Or compost or whatever you want, but this stuff would fall into, as pre-consumer waste, it would fall into animal feed and compostable material. Pre-consumer would be everything that the prep cooks do in every kitchen around the world every day. And a lot of it gets generated right into the trash can, but a lot of places also have a bucket where they call it the pig bucket, you know. So hopefully they washed all those lettuces, and this is what happens in stores all over the world, where they wash the lettuces, they peel the lettuces, and that shell of lettuce, excuse me, is pre-consumer waste. Great stuff to feed chickens, pigs, rabbits, you name it. Post-consumer waste is a huge, huge amount of stuff. Post-consumer waste is plate scrapings, okay? So if I scrape a plate into a bucket and take that bucket and feed my pigs, there's a chance that I will give whatever we're carrying in our mouth as normal flora to my pigs. So humans can transfer diseases to animals, and animals can transfer diseases to humans. So we don't do that. We don't take post-consumer waste because for it to fit into the category of feed, it would need to be boiled at 30 minutes, and then it would be allowable for a USDA feed ingredient. Very cumbersome. What do we do with post-consumer waste? We could probably make fuel and compost tomorrow. Let's go back to animal feed ingredients for just a moment. There's a book, A to Z, on animal feed ingredients that are allowable for the U.S. livestock. It includes things like alder or poplar, we call popple. Popple is a soft hardwood, very soft hardwood. It's a beautiful tree, there's several kinds. And in this book, it will tell you that you can use everything that is not subterranean up to 3/4-inch chips for X, Y, and Z kinds of animals. So I could take the popple tree, cut it down, and just throw it in my pig pen. Well, actually I couldn't, it should be 3/4 inch, or nothing smaller, I think, than 3/4-inch chips. Great stuff. Poultry waste is also an acceptable feed ingredient for beef. So we can clean out the chicken houses and give that to the beef. I just think there's better alternatives than that. Okay, so this is just a wide book, a collection of all the materials that are available out there and what would fit in a ration. When we build a hog ration now, today, it's out of glean. We utilize a banana box. Let's say for my herd presently, if I was building it all out of my glean, I would need somewhere around, give or take, 12 to 15 banana boxes with about 30 to 40 pounds of food in there. The mix of food would be breads, fruits, and vegetables. And that can go right into the pen because the pigs love these boxes. They tear them to shreds and they get composted right in the muck with everything else. So building a wholesome ration for livestock can be done in one or two ways. It could be a wet ration or it could be a dry ration. What I just described to you, even though it wasn't dripping wet, is considered a wet ration. That banana box with breads, fruits and vegetables, with all the plastic, metal, ties taken off, ready to eat, that would be considered a wet ration. A dry ration would be if I took all this material, let's say I took my load of bread and I processed it into a tub grinder and then I expressed it through an expeller, which would basically, let's think about like a meat grinder. And as that bread was being chopped up and pushed through the chuck of the meat grinder or the expeller, what would happen would be it would become maybe granulated or even look like a kibble. like a dog kibble or something, you follow me on that? Okay, when that's dried to 12%, that's considered a dry ration. So when I tear open a bag of feed, chicken feed, that's a dry ration. When I make my own, that's a wet ration. Now there's lots of variability in this feed piece, okay? Let's go back to the feed ingredient list. Bakery waste is considered a feed ingredient. Now, that's quite a broad range of what's bakery waste. The bakery waste we get is tremendous. You see it all the time at our dinner. It's beautiful bread. It's you know, we call it heart attack, which is all the sweet stuff. So pies, cookies, cakes, breads, bakery waste. So would, you know, like a silo of nasty old flour or nasty corn that's been yucked up by critters, vermin, right? Now, unfortunately and unfortunately, we have a very high quality bakery waste. Or it could be, let's say, the breadcrumbs out of a bread slicing operation. Right? But again, bakery waste is wide. So what we envision as, and so anyway, so I know I'm kind of jumping around a little bit now, I'm just looking at the time. Maybe I'll try to just kind of describe quickly how I put this in my mind's eye as a viable business, and then I'll take questions from y'all. I thought, well, heck, this stuff is all biological in nature. It's not plastic, it's not metal, it's organic. You know, it's not labeled organic, that's not what I'm talking about. Organic in nature. That's easy to make that makes sense, right? So I thought about organic recyclers. You know, we go out and get all the stuff that is of organic nature, and we save it from going in the waste stream. So that included the pallets or the wood that I used to scrap a pen together, and it included, you know, going after, let's say, dairy drops, which is a livestock for a dairy farmer, and a dairy farmer is calving, and as the calf is being born out of that cow, they sex it, they look at it, and they say it's a male or a female. If it's a female, there's usually a shout that goes on, woohoo, got another female, that's gonna be a milk animal for them eventually. If it's a bull, they let it drop, thus the name dairy drop. It's a bull. Hits the ground, they push it up onto the compost pile. It never gets a chance to suckle, it dies. Because a dairy farmer has a bull. They don't need another bull. However, when the veal market is up, you can't find any dairy drops because people who make veal scap those up. They're not very efficient animals, okay? And what that means is, let's say I had a dairy bull and I had a beef bull, okay, like an Angus or a Belted Galloway versus a Jersey or a Hereford, okay? This animal does not put up a lot of mass of beef, a lot of muscle for the amount of grain I'll have to feed that animal. Versus this animal over here, you feed it whatever that is supposed to be fed, it's gonna grow into a big old steak, okay? Here, this is gonna look like some kind of Ethiopian cow, okay, just emaciated. However, if you're gleaning, and you're gleaning them, then you can feed them with the glean and it makes sense. So I'll give you an example. I don't have the disposable cash I used to. At the time, I raised some dairy drops. And at the end of that season, by the way, a cow or a beef usually takes 1.5 years to grow up to the market size. So that means you gotta winter them over here, that means you need hay, very expensive. Here I am feeding this animal with all my gleaned material, and I got some decent sized animals. 500-pound dairy bulls, which we neutered, you know, so they were actually steer. And at the end of the season, we harvested them and completely turned them into chopped meat, or ground meat, or hamburg, as they say in Maine. And so out of several dairy drops, we were able to get somewhere, let's say, 500 pounds of ground beef, and that ground beef, 500 times $5 a pound, is, you know, $2,500 that I didn't have to buy beef. So it's efficient for me as a gleaner. Not efficient for Joe Hamburger over here, who's just putting out these beautiful steaks, and he's growing, or she's growing, a whole sea of beef on grain. Very different model. So anyway, so that's that. Organic Recyclers goes after the food It's interested in feeding people, it's interested in feeding animals, and it's interested in making compost and fuel. However, again, I kind of shot myself in the foot by putting up this free meal and saying it was sponsored by Organic Recyclers, and you know, the local folk were like, "What's that Brown doing now? Selling recycled food?" So I separated that, and with recent help, we moved it away from Organic Recyclers, although it's still, you know, that's still part of the plan. But our fiscal sponsor, because we operate as a nonprofit startup, is Farm Tomorrow, which is actually COA graduates that are in Gouldsboro that have a nonprofit. So when you hear Farm Tomorrow's Food for All program, everybody starts to salivate, you know, that makes sense, versus Organic Recyclers, which is just a semantic issue, but still, you know how our society works. If they think it's like whatever, then that's the end of it. So, no, we don't have recycled food. We don't have repurposed food. We have food that was meant to be eaten. It's just you need somebody to go out and get it, and that's what we do. And if we talked about numbers for a second, it's something insane. Like, and I don't know how I've done this. Hundreds of tons of food just off of MDI. And I couldn't even begin to tell you how many mouths it's gone to. Or like, I used to keep a pretty close number of how many animals have gone on it, but now it's kind of changed. Anyway, the ultimate vision here, what is the ultimate vision? Well, if there's enough food that's being wasted, we know today that not only can we feed people that are in poverty, we can feed people who are nutritionally impoverished. That's really close to my heart as a speech path, because when I was doing work with the poor people of Maine, and this is neighbors, these are people right here next to you, okay? Johnny, I was supposed to work with this little kid, and the only thing this child ate was Doritos and Coca-Cola, and now I'm expected to get speech and language out of this person, which, by the way, is your latest, most high-intense brain function, okay? I mean, if it was just to swallow, that's one thing, but here it is, that you can't do it. So, not only can we feed the people in poverty, but the people who are nutritionally impoverished with what's being wasted today. The vision I had again was, we can make soup on a grand scale, we can hermetically seal it in a cryovac container, we can ship it anywhere in the world as emergency rations, pantry stock. You could eat it at room temperature because it was hermetically sealed and done aseptically to begin with. So I actually had I saw a pallet of our soup, potato leek soup out of Aroostook County, being set in like a FEMA emergency setting, like a Katrina problem, right? And people just coming out of the woods, grabbing these things and, fighting over this nutritional pack, which was soup. Once you open it, of course, it's gotta be refrigerated, but it's only a quart anyway. And then I started thinking about you COAers, you're like, it won't work because it's plastic, and I was like, well, maybe they can fill it with mud when they're done, or sand, and it's a building block. But it's much more than Food for All. Food for All is nothing more than a marketing tool. That's the way I see it. I said, geez, I gotta start getting people to understand what the heck I'm doing. Why don't I have a free meal? I'll put up a free soup. And we got permission to use that space. I put up a sign that said free soup, and I shot myself in the other foot because soup, free soup, soup kitchen. That's what that meant to the world. And people are like, that's not for me, it's for somebody else. I'm like, oh man. So what do? We kind of kept on working it and kept on showing people that no, it's just a regular meal, come on in. We want you all to come in because that's another huge thing. If you're in a situation where you're in poverty, it is so difficult to climb out of that. I mean, I did not choose to lose my jobs or not get paid. I have a master's degree and I'm not employed, And there's gotta be a whole lot of guys or gals like me out there. Not only that, I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, gee, I think I'm gonna be an IV drug user, or I think, you know what, I think I'm gonna be homeless today. That does not happen on purpose, okay? When you are there though, when this is happening to you, things change in your body. Your brain changes. You have to now survive. And it is so difficult to come out of that. And I'm telling you firsthand, all right? I know it. I'm still struggling brutally. You don't even want to know my difficulties. However, we as a collective group have an opportunity. And I think right now it's become quite popular. So anyway, I can always welcome you to our dinner. I can always welcome your talent and your understanding and your prayers because it's all day, every day. So anyway, I'm gonna go on forever unless I stop to take questions, so thank you for your attention. So let's get some questions going. Yes,
How many big box stores do you think in the U.S. or?
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt, just say your name and.
Tom.
Okay, Tom.
How many big box stores do you think have people like you gleaning to help communities and, you know, around the area?
I think it's becoming more popular. Give you an exact number, I don't even know if there's numbers on there, but what we've seen recently is some statistics that are coming out where since they've started collecting food security information, something like 15% of all US households in the late 90s are food insecure. So not enough. How about another couple questions? Yes. Yes.
You mentioned it like during the presentation, you, Malina, you were posing this question, and I thought maybe, I don't know, you were going to answer it, or was it a rhetorical question, but you said something like, how do you start a conversation with people who don't understand what you're doing, or who
Yes.
don't want to understand what you're doing?
I think a great way to do that is feed them or show them. And that's what I did. I kind of defaulted to that, where all of a sudden, this little community dinner thing is buzzing pretty hard, and people want to know, you know. We have somebody come in, and they'll just come in and they'll take a look, and they're like, it smells so good in here, or look at all these people. So there's a hook, you know, there's a hook with anything, but, you know, we got to eat, so that's an easy one. I think it's taking the time to understand where a different, you know, a different generation is at, and where they were at, and what they've learned, and what they need to unlearn. And I think that I did a lot of that when I came to Maine. It's not only that we need to learn more stuff, we need to unlearn some things that really were not truths that we learned as we were coming along. Unfortunate, and very fortunate for you folks who are here at this school, you know, there's a whole lot of truths coming out now, and it's a good thing. It's not like, I mean, there's a whole lot of BS that still happens, but still, you guys get to the crux of the problem right away. So I think it's taking the time in a very empathetic way, and being, you know, certainly my training has a huge amount. They kind of consider us these compassionate scientist types, you know, because everybody has that much importance. You know, you are as important as the homeless person. That was my training, you know. If you came in and you had a cut on your finger and you weren't breathing, it didn't matter. You got my attention first. And I think once you individualize that with a person who might have, they're not sure. The not sure is really not too hard to deal with. It's the people that are like hardwired and they're like, man, something's wrong. Then you get a different kind of Chris Brown in your face. Absolutely. I'm not very pleasant at that point. I don't want to say I'm rude. Well, no, I probably am a little rude. But I'm going to make sure you understand that you are way off base. That you tell me, and I'll even come to, no, look at that, look, you know, and if they don't want it, they move on. You know, so you can only, you know, there's always going to be a statistical significance there. How many people out of 10 are you going to be able to convince that this is a good thing? It's got to be what? At least 8? Unless they're really messed up. Or no factory or something. Yes?
And I was just curious, you only glean from Hannaford's, or do you?
Oh, no, we have quite a reach, yeah. And we, you know, it's interesting also, there's some shifting going on in the industry, and access to the material is becoming more difficult. So that's a whole nother subject. It's quite scary right now. And, you know, people are starting to realize, the businesses are starting to realize, wow, we need to quantify this. We need to know what's going out the door. We need to know how to get reimbursed for it, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. And also, there's another group of people who are actually, I call them these kind of like pseudo-bureaucracies or pseudo-municipal authorities that say, oh no, you can't give that to everybody. You can only give that to these poor people. And only those poor people will come in and sign that they can get that stuff. And I say, you know what? No. That makes that poor person worse by you doing that. I'm saying, why don't you all come in? And, oh wow, you need some help? I know there's a person sitting right down next to you. Actually, I don't even need to say that. It just happens. When you come into a community setting, You have students, you have poor, you have retirees, you have other people, and it happens. That happened on its own. I did not get up and say, I'm gonna start community dinners. No, I said, I wanna give away soup. And then the community found it. Does that answer your question? Yes.
That's my question.
Okay. Couple more. Yes, sir.
I never heard actually who Bill Emerson was. Why is that named after him?
I don't know. I think he did,
That's the kind of thing
I
that
think he was a
interests me.
guy that probably got sued. I don't know. It's in there somewhere, it's in a corrupted file, like over here. I think the guy was doing dinners or something, and it just kind of gained, do you know the answer, Tom?
He co-signed the act, and then I think a year later he passed away.
From bad food.
Yeah, he got that rusty nail in the bread. I want to say that he was involved with community work too, but I'm not clear.
So he was a legislator that introduced.
From what I
the-
heard.
Yeah,
Couple more? I know it's really nice out. So thank you so much for coming in and listening to this. Yes, Tom?
Just one more. Do you know if there's any like major movements like in the US, kind of like, I'm not gonna say Red Cross, but like something like that where it just is there to help people? Like, I mean, that does what you're doing, but on a major scale, like, and reaches throughout, like sends out a thing like, so that every company in like Ellsworth, say, knows to put out their food for a truck that comes by every day, or?
Yeah, I think there's tons of things that have been doing that for years. I mean, there's an opportunity where, all these like-minded nonprofits and caregiving societies do that sort of stuff, whether it's the post office picking something up on a food march on a Saturday, or right now presently Good Shepherd food banks. So there are many, many, many places that do that. I think the coordinating of it's getting better, and I think we do a real poor job in our state, but in our particular county, we're booming on this, because it's kind of getting popular now. And now there's there's a bit of a competition for this material. And that's why some people don't like what I do, because I throw a wide net. I'm not going to isolate, and that's creating a problem. Because it does not make you justify your job. You see, you've gotten paid for this. You're sitting behind a desk and you're thinking, we need more poor people. And that Brown is screwing it up. Because I can't tell who are the poor ones in that dinner, Yeah, that's the problem. We're throwing a wrench in their works, yes we are. Come on, give me some more, yes.
Hi, Chris, Gray Cox. Just a question about the distribution. So currently you've got the Thursday meals at the Catholic Church downtown, and then you've got the pig and chicken operation, and occasionally calves, drop dairy, as you call them. And then like the broccoli and the other sorts of things, are you giving those away through the food pantry, or are there drop points in town, or? I'm just sort of wondering, in terms of distribution, how's that actually?
I'll share our distribution with you, whether you believe it or not. Our food, and this is gonna get out of this room, and it's gonna create another wrench in the works, but I'm gonna answer your question. What I do here, in this minuscule glean, makes it all the way up to Holton. And on top of several individuals that come directly to my place for distribution, or I use the curb, and several other outlets, we move upwards of, this time of year, over 2 tons a week. And then, if you included the animal feed end of it, another couple tons. And in the high season, I would expect we're gonna see probably, it's usually 5 tons a week, but it's gonna be more. It just seems every year it's a little more. So, to answer your question, what happens is, just through kind of like a network that we've developed, pretty I don't wanna say, not a hard and fast network, but it's, hey, are you on today? Yep. Okay, yep. Come on in, I'll see you there later. And they'll come down and they'll pick up from me, and they always get the education piece. This is animal feed, this is good. Where's it, you need to do this. Because when I give you stuff, not at the dinner, like if I handed this, like if I said, okay, here you go, Gray, this is for you today. I want you to take that, I want you to eat that in good health. I don't want you to turn it. I don't want you to go back to Hannaford. I don't want you to hold that over anybody. If you want to give that to somebody, do that. But don't sell it, and don't hold it over hold it over. And that happens at dinners. Like, if we did not follow the Bill Emerson Food Act, and that, well, you mentioned Catholic Church, which was, I shot myself on my 3rd foot on that one. This is not a very popular place for the Catholics up here, okay? This is where they ran them out, if you will. So even being associated with that space created a rift where a bunch of people wouldn't come through the door. So we say we use that spot. That's why if you've ever seen any of my posts, it's always on the corner of Ledge Lawn and Mount Desert Street. However, that's my club, you know, I belong to that club too, that's a whole nother subject. But anyway, part of the deal on that is that we can't proselytize. I have great volunteers, by the way, I have several of you volunteered, but I have a consistent group that's coming out of the LDS church, the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Here these kids are on mission, they actually go on a 2-year mission, walk around with white shirts and nice long skirts and a name tag, and they're like bouncing off the walls looking for something to do. They showed up, said, we're here to volunteer, except they talked to the wrong guy and they were leaving. As I was walking back in the kitchen, I said, what are you guys doing here? They're like, well, we came in here to volunteer, but they said there was nothing to do. And I'm like, oh, you talked to the wrong guy. Come on back. I got those kids washing dishes. They were just down at the farm shoveling chips. So, yeah. So they can't proselytize. I told them. I said, you wear your name tags all you want, but if you start running smack about Jesus Christ on anybody that comes through the store, you're going to have to do that on your own time. So that would be that would be a breach of that Bill Emerson Food Act, and we could get sued for that. Yeah, yeah. So there's no money, there's no suggested donation. There's a bucket if you want to donate, but there's nothing strong arm about it. Really, really important. And that's liberating, by the way. That's a beautiful thing to just give it all away. It is good. Yeah.
Where do the donations go?
To grow the program.
Oh, cool.
Yes. Well, let's think about it. People say, "Oh, you got that for free." There's nothing's free.
It takes
I mean,
work.
how much do you think that weighs? How many boxes do you think I lifted like that today? Okay, so there's a cost.
So many
The
trucks
vehicle cost.
kill.
You know how many cars I've gone through? I've killed 2 Suburbans, a couple 3 Forests, a Subaru or 2, and I'm working on another truck and another Subaru right now. We're killing them. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And remember I told you I was a newlywed when I came up here? My wife married a medical professional. She did not marry a gleaner. So if you want to talk about free, there's costs hidden all over. Oh yeah, but just think about it, right? So you're right. So what we're trying to do, and it wasn't by my doing, it was by some of the folks that were coming into dinner and saying, who is this guy? What is he, you know, this is crazy. How could he be doing this? And then they asked me, how do you do this? I'm like, oh no, I gotta get the stuff, I gotta cook it. And they're like, well, how do you get the gas in your car? I'm like, well, yeah, I put it out of my pocket. And wait, let me show you. Here. There. Dust. So the monies that come through, I'm being a little facetious here, of course, but there we have a budget now, and we're looking at trying to professionalize this and make it sustainable and reproducible. So you need a manager, and then you need a volunteer team. You need lots of donations, and just like from what I can remember, it was something like $25,000 of in-kind donations. So we put a number on what the store doesn't even know they're giving us. And then we're putting a stipend in for a manager, which will hopefully be me. And I know I'll be voted out real soon, but I think that's the living wage here in Maine, so it's $18,000 a year, which is, I was trying to make somewhere a lot more, yeah. So we got a vehicle, I got a card now, I can put fuel in that vehicle, and we're gonna see if that continues. I see a bigger vision still, yes.
Yes, hi, I'm Tari.
Hey, Tari.
What about the times like when we don't have enough food and we actually go to the grocery store and buy food ourselves?
Oh, yeah,
Like
absolutely.
during,
Yeah,
like,
that
you
happens
spend
too.
your
So
own
there's
money.
expenses. Yeah, Tara, you're right. So a lot of things we buy, oils, drink mixes, there's supplies, yes, there's a cost. It is not, yeah, this is not what you want to do if you want to be wealthy. In paper. There's much more to it than paper, yes.
Are you paying for the utilities using the kitchen,
No,
electricity?
no, that's an in-kind donation because the church here lets us use that space. Yes, because they got a beautiful kitchen, brand new range, and I could get like 300 people in that room. That's why I thought, And by the way, let me tell you how that conversation went and how that actually happened there. It was at the end of November, a couple of years back, and the pastor was a very, very jovial guy, very nice man, we're friends. And he was showing off a book that he had somebody put together of all his pictures on all his trips. And he's funny like that. He's like, look at this, you know, it's a bound book. And so he's showing me this thing, and I'm kind of like, you know, paying my dues by sitting there looking at it. But I do get a kick out of him. And he says, I said to him, you know, Jack, this is a quote, you know, Jack, I think I got enough food to make a soup. And he says, what do you mean? I got his voice down. For those of you guys that know, what do you mean make a soup? I said, I think I got enough food, because he knew all my troubles, because I would go and tell him that, I love my job, you know, and now I go like, I found all this food, you know. So what do you mean you're going to make a soup? I said, Jack, I was thinking, like, I got so much food now, I could probably make a soup here and give it away. Free soup? I said, yeah. He says, what are you going to do, put a sign on the corner that says free soup? I said, yeah. When are you going to do it? Thursday? This Thursday? I said, yeah, I'm doing it Thursday, that's it. That was it. And he goes, really? I said, yeah, you watch. Because he didn't think I could do it. So I went and I made this hokey sign that said free soup, and I showed up, and I cooked 3 soups. I made a pork soup, hot pork soup, a vegan veggie, and a chicken soup. And that was it. And it was me for 1.5 years doing that. And it was great. It was kind of fun, you know, because it wasn't fun like when everybody left. See you later, that was great, you know? And I'm like, oh man, I gotta wash all these dishes. So now we have a really super core group of volunteers. I don't get out of here at 9:30, 10 o'clock anymore. We get out of there at 8 o'clock. We're finished at 7. That was the other thing I did. I knocked it back to 7 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. And when we're out of there, we're out of there. Place is spotless. I'm thanking all these wonderful volunteers, and then I can't wait for next week. Yeah. So I go in on a Wednesday night prep with another sous chef, and we get things ready for Thursday, and then I come in Thursday about 10 a.m., and we get it done. It's pretty cool. We're seeing anywhere from 100 to 150 people. Thursday, the mix is really nice, maybe a third really in need, a third working poor and working people that could probably cover their costs, and another group of people that could probably cover the costs that are people in need. I know we're over. I'm late to pick up my kiddos too, so how about one more question? One more, put the pressure on that questioner. I had this professor that I wrote on the board once. Pluralistic ignorance. What was that? She goes, this means everybody wants to ask a question, but they think they're going to be stupid if they ask the question. So I always ask those questions. Yes?
Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
I'm just, I'm curious a little bit. You said that you have a really wide reach, both in terms of the stores that you get from and like where you distribute. How many, or could you elaborate on that a little bit? Like how many, or where, what district?
I'm sorry.
No idea.
It's a secret. You'll have to come to dinner.
Okay.
And then you'll have to do like a paper or something and follow us around on a pole. We call that going to get at a pole. Like when they pull lobster traps, we pull. It's not enough.
Oh, yeah,
But we have an infrastructure issue.
I was wondering if you can also volunteer to come with your pick up food if you need help, or if you're just interested to see how you do it, like
Sure.
one time.
Sure, that always happens. We try to be very transparent. Yeah. A lot of your colleagues have already pursued this. So some people Abby Verrier did a Flickr. This on Flickr. So if you kind of searched around, you'll see that there's been several. Davis Eo, he wrote a beautiful article for your paper whenever that came out. Tomas, we have a bunch of different people. I know I'm leaving some people out. But yeah, it's becoming more of a buzzword, more popular. And again, there's other groups that are really trying to indoctrinate their own work too. And I don't want to sound real bitter about it, but I am a little. But the bottom line is, a lot of those other people are getting paid very well. And I want to see people get paid, of course, but I want to see the issues being addressed from a point of view of these people over here, and that's this stuff over here, not justifying my existence. Yeah.
Yeah, so if the questions are right, I just want to make a comment, if I can, which is, I've heard a lot of really good human ecology forum talks this year. And this is the first one where I really feel led to offer a standing ovation. Oh.